Hello folks, Darrel Smith from South Dakota. Today I would like to talk to you a little bit about instrument flying. After every takeoff, a pilot has to have some sort of a plan to get the airplane back on the ground safely. That's not a big problem when the weather's good and you can see the runway, you just go there and land. But as the visibility is reduced, it becomes more and more difficult, and that's where instrument flying comes into effect. I had my first experience with instrument flying was in the military, Marine Corps, Navy flight training program. The first few months was all visual, and if it was cloudy or rainy, we couldn't fly. We just stay on the ground. But later they started giving us instructions in instruments, and that's where you have to use what instruments are available in the cockpit and make the airplane go and do what you want it to do without the luxury of being able to look outside. I can remember one of my instrument flying days or flights. I was in the back seat of a DC-9, or not a DC-9, an F-9 training airplane, had tandem cockpit. I was in the back cockpit, and they called it a bag, or that they could pull up and over the back cockpit, and where you couldn't see outside at all. And I can remember we were in Beeville, Texas, and I was in the back seat, and I pulled the hood up over so I couldn't see outside, and we did a takeoff roll. The instructor made kept the aircraft on center line during the takeoff roll because I couldn't see out, but I rotated at the proper speed and went flying, pulled the gear up, pulled the flaps up, and climbed out, cruised, started to let down, and got radar vectors to an approach to an airfield in New Iberia. And the instructor finally said, "Okay, you can pop the hood." And it was quite a revelation. I looked outside, and the aircraft was lined up and in the right altitude and position to make a normal landing at that airport. I had flown up there without seeing anything, and so it was a big day for me. It wasn't anything. I wasn't anything special. All our pilots could do that. In the military, we had pretty basic instruments. For as far as navigation goes, there was a needle that we could dial in stations, and it would point toward that station. And also we had distance, so we knew where the station was, and we knew how far we were from it. Later, in the airline flying, the first years, we weren't much better than that. We did have an ILS, or we had a visual of the landing, the glide slope, and we also had a flight director, which was a big help. I remember once, after I was working with the airline, and the aircraft instrumentation had been improved drastically. I was flying a 757, my co-pilot and I, from Minneapolis to Seattle. We launched out of Minneapolis knowing that Seattle had been fogged in for days, and it wasn't forecast to get any better. We had a load of people, the airplane was full. We arrived in Seattle, and the weather had not improved. This particular airplane was a new model. They call it a glass cockpit. There's quite a complicated checklist and procedures to make it do it, but I was comfortable enough to say landing. Landing did not mean that I was going to land the airplane. It meant that I was happy with the procedures, and I felt confident that the aircraft would land itself. And that's what happened. And just as an instance, all backup systems, we had 3 autopilots, and they all have to be engaged in order to shoot that approach. If one of them was inoperative, we could not land there. So the airplane worked out just fine. The airplane flew itself, and we could see nothing. We felt the back wheels land, hit the runway. The nose was lowered onto the runway, and just as it touched, the nose wheel touched, I could look outside and just barely see the centerline markings on the runway. It was really heavy fog. Tower cleared us to clear the runway, and I was able to make out a taxiway, and so I took the nose wheel steering wheel and attempted to steer toward that direction. The automatic landing system was still engaged, and it would not allow me to move off the center line of that runway. So I had to disengage all the automatic stuff to be able to taxi to the terminal. On the other end of the scale, when I was in Vietnam, we had a pretty basic approach system, and at times there would be long periods of heavy clouds and rain, light mist all the time. And I was at that time I had my job. All Marines have jobs other than flying. I was a briefing officer. I would brief the guys as to what they could expect on their flights for that combat flight for that day. Well, we had what they called a GCA, and that was an approach system. It's ground controlled approach. And somewhere on the field, I'm not sure where they were, there was controllers. They had 2 radar sets set up. One of them gave them information as to how we were on glide slope, and the other one was how we were our own course. And using just words of mouth, just by voice voice commands, they were able to fly us to a proper position to land on the runway. It was dark and rainy, and rather tense, I would say. But for some reason, once I heard that controller's voice, he was very controlled, knowledgeable voice, and he would say something like, "This is your final controller. Do not respond to any further communications." And then he would just start talking and give you all the way to the ground. He would say things like, "You're slightly above glide slope, you're slightly below glide slope." We did have a vertical speed indicator in the cockpit, so we knew about what rate of descent was needed in order to stay on glide slope or near glide slope. So I never did know where they were located on the field, and I don't think I ever met one of them, but if I did, I'd sure shake their hand, because they had my life in their hand. So anyway, that's a little bit about instrument flying and a couple of incidents that really happened, and I hope you found it a bit interesting anyway. Thank you very much.